Hello, sunshine. This is Alexi, LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking United States soccer's latest AGM and the elections, Thierry Henry, Ronaldo criticism, VAR, Bale, EPL, Bundesliga, me owning Detroit, La Liga, the greatest foreign player ever to play in the U.S., the art world, weird science, the investigation, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, oh, yes, you love him. You know him. My friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how are you doing on this Monday, March 1st in the year 2021, the first day of the beautiful month of March?
I'm doing well after a week in which I spent an inordinate amount of time thinking about Pele's career, thanks to Netflix.
Oh, yeah. You want to talk about that? This is, I don't know, when do you start your pandemic day? Do you have a date? I have the Friday the 13th. So we're coming up to the year anniversary here, but we obviously are in the month where the majority of people kind of circle as the start of a year, if you can believe that it's been a year. Are you too in March? Do you have a date?
I just remember it being in March. I don't have an exact date.
I have Friday the 13th. Fitting, right? Okay, so Mosse, what have you been watching? I know you really want to talk about Pele. Okay, go ahead.
Well, no, I've been on a bit of a documentary kick. I watched the Pele Netflix doc, which we'll get to in a second. I also watched the Hotel Cecil. I have a new favorite musician, Morbid. Mm-hmm. On a serious note, I watched last night The Dissident, which is this very controversial documentary made about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And I'm looking forward to Netflix this week, actually dropped today, released a documentary on the Notorious B.I.G. It's called I Got a Story to Tell.
Yes.
I'm going to watch it this week. I won't make you watch it, but both are...
No. I am going to watch it just because everybody's talking about it and everybody's excited about it. But, you know, the mark of a good movie and obviously a good documentary is you don't even have to be interested in the subject to appreciate it. And so that's how I'm going into it. Okay, well, I don't... I claim to be a fan of the music. I can appreciate how important he was, and obviously the drama surrounding his life and death, but which is interesting to me. But I remain to be entertained. So hopefully I am.
Well, a little bit of a tease for next week. Both our producers, Jeff Hernandez and Luis Aguilar, claim to be massive hip hop fans, and so I'm going to bring them into the conversation next week and get their thoughts on the Biggie documentary. But let's talk Pele.
Okay. All right.
I'm ready, Mosse.
All right.
I saw your tweet about it, and I pretty much agree. I think you gave it a 7 out of 10. Your conclusion was good, but not great, and that's more or less where I land. I thought it was well done. It had that Netflix polish to it, but I did feel like they tried to cover too many topics in too short of time, and so the whole thing felt rushed. If you're really going to properly cover that whole 12-year time span of his, covering 4 World Cups and then exploring all those issues of race and politics, you almost need like a Last Dance, several hours documentary to do it properly. If you're only going to do an hour 45, then I almost wish they had just focused exclusively on the 1970 World Cup. So that was my take. Overall, pretty good, but felt a bit rushed.
Now, would your take be different had you not seen the Maradona doc? I mean, is it always going to be referenced and back and forth, and therefore your judgment of this maybe is taken down a notch because of it coming so close to the Maradona doc?
Perhaps, yeah. That was a clearly superior documentary. And also, I maybe knew too much about Pele, so I didn't learn all that much about it. For example, the whole João Saldanha part, he was the coach who wanted to drop Pele, who accused him of having bad eyesight, who was then sacked on the eve of the 1970 World Cup and replaced by Zagallo. I knew all about that. In fact, I know that whole situation better than most because my dad actually knew João Saldanha, was good friends with his daughter. So I grew up hearing stories about that guy. But for example, somebody like Keith Costigan, who I spoke to, he was fascinated by that whole part because he knew nothing about it. So he learned a lot. I also spoke to our good friend Jason Wormser, who knew nothing about the dictatorship in Brazil in the 60s and that whole deal. So he was fascinated by that. So perhaps I wasn't the target audience for this podcast. It was more for people who wanted more of an introduction to Pele.
What did you think about the dictatorship part and the political part of it? I felt I felt it was forced. Okay. And I'm not saying that it's not important, especially nowadays when we talk about athletes and what they are on the court or on the field and what they aren't. Even back then, when, with regards to the compare and contrast with Muhammad Ali and what he was doing relative to politics and speaking out and demanding that this global star do stuff. What do you think in terms of the way that was portrayed?
I agree. It felt a bit forced and not really done the right way. And it was interesting to watch that against the backdrop of this whole Zlatan LeBron back and forth that occurred recently. So yeah, this question of athletes and how outspoken they should be and how much they should use their platform. So yeah, it's a debate that was going on even back then and still goes on.
I got the feeling we didn't quite get the full picture of it. And also somebody asked me the other day why the Cosmos part, which from an American perspective is such a huge part of who he is and where a lot of people were, some people were introduced to him, but and it was that the only other professional type of situation that he was in wasn't a part of. Now there's a great Cosmos documentary, and maybe they just said it was dealt with in such a great way by that documentary. They just didn't want to tag that on. And to your point, I do agree it could have been longer and maybe forced or just it felt constricted.
Yeah, I didn't mind that so much. And I also didn't mind them skipping through his childhood. Whenever I read a biography of a famous person, I never care what they were like as kids. Those first 50 pages are always a bit of a slog until you get to when they started doing the thing that made them famous. So I was fine with that. But even that period concentrating from when he first walked in the door at Santos in 1956 through the 1970 World Cup final, and then it was okay to me that they yada the last part of his career post 1970. But even that the period they focus on, there's so much there that I felt like I said, it could have been this Last Dance, like several hours documentary. And I will say one thing. I've watched so many Pele documentaries and it's always the same goals. And I'm kind of sick of seeing the same plays over and over again. I know it's hard to find footage from the 1961 Campeonato Paulista, but I'm still holding out hope. It's like a musician that has this great unreleased material that's never been heard. And you imagine it's in some vault somewhere and you just hope somebody can ever find it and put it out into the world. I'm always hoping that I'm going to see different Pele plays than I've already seen.
You are such a Pele and Brazil hipster. It's just ridiculous. It's a joke. All right. I did enjoy it, and I do think it's a 7 out of a 10, and I do recommend it. Hotel Cecil or Cecil or whatever we're pronouncing it, just real quick, and then I'll give you the stuff that I watched this week because I had watched this before you, and I have my thoughts. But go ahead.
Yeah, I read a review that said that this was a true crime documentary in search of a crime.
Exactly.
And I have to say, look, I don't want to make light of the passing of this girl. It's a tragic story, but I found this documentary at times ridiculous, and I found myself laughing. It felt like a Best in Show spoof of a true crime documentary. I mean, you have a guy whose job is a YouTuber. You have this manager of the hotel who says that in the 10 years she worked there, 80 people died. But then later on in the documentary, she bristles at some of the negative Yelp reviews that the hotel received. And then you have this guy Morbid who, I'm sorry, but when you're accused of murder and you put out a video to protest your innocence, maybe you don't want to put a mask on and say, I'm innocent, and talk like that. I mean, just to... I mean, that guy was, and he's so distraught that he stopped making music. And I mean, the music we've been deprived of the last 7 or 8 years,
such a jerk.
Real tragedy.
I agree with you though. Yeah, it was, I mean, there's a point where you just want to say to this, you are saying to the screen, I found myself saying, just ask him if the latch was open or closed. And he just dragged it on and on and on until the end. All right. And those that watched it know exactly what I'm talking about, but not a recommendation from the State of the Union pod here. 3 things that I watched this week. Made You Look, which I think is on Netflix, about a art con, $80 million type of and decades long art con involving forgeries and fake masterpieces from, well, they weren't masterpieces in that they were fakes of some of the great artists out there and how that all played out. So that was interesting. Not a 10 out of 10, but certainly interesting. And it also at a certain point made you say, why do I care about these people that are dealing in a world that most of us don't ever deal with or live in? 2, The Investigation, which is on HBO, and I totally screwed this up because I thought it was only a certain amount of episodes, and you know me, I like to binge from the start to the end, or at least, or wait until everything is in so that I can binge. I screwed it up, and so I've watched it. It's about it. There is a true crime element in that it is based on a crime that happened a few years ago, where this young entrepreneur up in Scandinavia had his own submarine and ended up murdering a local journalist. But I think it's 6 episodes right now. So I'm stuck in the middle of this 4-episode type of thing where I've only seen 4 and I have to wait for the next one. So that's irritating, but I do like it. It's not very fast in that it is at times slow, but in an interesting way. So I do recommend that. And then I went back and, from my 80s, I watched Weird Science again. I love Weird Science. Mosse, you've probably never seen Weird Science, but have you?
Once, but
okay. Anyway, it's
I know
a classic.
A very important movie for.
It's still interesting. It probably wouldn't. Well, it wouldn't be made. There's no way it would be made in the same the same way today. But I still love it, and I will always love Weird Science. I will say this before we move on, real quick, Mosse. And this is to show you the reach that you have, okay, and the influence that you have out there. One of the teachers at my son's school has a bone to pick with you because you turned him on. You were like the pusher, right? And now you've created this addict when it comes to Lupin, whatever it's called, yeah. Lupin, right? In that, evidently, it's a 10-episode show, but they've only released 5. And the next 5 aren't coming out until sometime in the summer. And so to Mr. M out there, apologies that we didn't make that clear, because you got him hooked and now he feels like he's in limbo right now and dying for that next 5 to come out. And we didn't properly, I think, explain the fact that you would be in this limbo until the next 5 come out.
No, that's fair. Yeah, I think a lot of people felt like it was awkwardly abrupt when they cut it off, right when the show was sort of in a groove. I also, by the way, want to apologize to your lovely wife, because I was a tad glib about the whole bureau thing. And yeah, I really did give out some misleading information there. That show is a Sundance show that happens to be available via Amazon Prime, but you have to sign up for Sundance and pay some money. So it's a lot more complicated than I made it sound. I took the plunge and have no regrets, because like I said, it's one of the 10 best television shows I've ever seen in my life. But I do understand that most people don't like paying for extra money for television at this point. So
she did at one point in this back and forth, turned to me and said, "Now, is he accusing me of being cheap?" And so I will pass along your apologies, and that's fine. All right, let's stop talking about this. Let's get to the most important stuff, which is the soccer. You ready to light this candle?
Yep.
All right. Well, we're going to kick it off here with we call it the State of the Union, but I guess more of the state of U.S. soccer. When I say U.S. soccer, not U.S. Lowercase soccer, U.S. big uppercase soccer, the United States Soccer Federation. But before we get to that, the breaking news over the week was one of the greats, Thierry Henry, who had continued his coaching career over here in Major League Soccer, has decided to stop. And this was a shock, because he was kind of the figurehead for this new Montreal team. And he was being used in all of their advertising and the promotion, this rebranded Montreal team. And I think it came as a shock to a lot of people. Now, I want to be very careful and sensitive because Thierry Henry, I don't think anybody expected him to be a 10-year type of project here, or to be around, because he had aspirations coming from different places and certainly back in Europe. And he would be attractive going forward as long as he wasn't just horrible, which he certainly wasn't. However, nobody expected him to leave after 1 year. And he has cited family reasons. And I want to respect that. And especially when it comes to the Canadian teams, and we've talked about this before, it's been trying on all teams and all players and all coaches and staffs out there. But in particular, the Canadian teams, who weren't allowed to even be back in their home markets and had to, have these satellite type of American bases that they were playing out of. And he didn't see his family for a number of months, and that weighs on you. And so I certainly can't fault him in any way for wanting to be as close to the people that he loves now, and just recognizing that certainly in the last year, he wasn't able to do that because of the realities of Major League Soccer, and anticipating the continued problems and challenges going forward. He just did not want to continue that. What say you, Mosse? Because there is also the other part where, he could very quickly surface again because he is attractive out there in a job over in Europe.
Well, yeah, this news came about amidst these links with Bournemouth, and so a lot of people put two and two together and thought that might have something to do with it. Montreal have been pretty adamant that there was nothing to the Bournemouth stuff. It was fake news. They were never contacted by Bournemouth, and neither was Thierry Henry. So this decision is completely independent of that. But even if he were to resurface with Bournemouth is a 2-hour train ride from London, where his family is based. So to me, that would not be incompatible with the reasons that he gave for leaving this job. It does seem like it was just the distance from his family and the travel restrictions being what they are. And I think a lot of us went through this thing where we thought, well, get through 2020, 2021 will be better. And then it starts to dawn on you that 2021 isn't going to be that much different from 2020. And does he want to go another year where he goes several months without seeing his kids? And so, he came to this conclusion that he was going to walk away. It's not clear to me what MLS has lost from a coaching standpoint. It's early in his coaching career, and to me, the results have been inconclusive so far. But certainly in terms of a personality and a big name, it is a bummer because, as you mentioned, Montreal, they went through this whole rebrand this offseason. They're trying to sexy up their image, and having a coach like Thierry Henry is a big, big part of that.
And they got to go out and find a new coach now. And, had this been done in the off season, and once again, that's not a knock on, you make the decisions and let the chips fall where they may. But those chips right now have fallen on a team, like you said, is rebranded. And now they have to go out and figure out who is best to lead this team forward, and to come in at the 11th hour now and figure it out very, very quickly and start that. I think they'll have plenty of suitors. It'll be interesting to see who they ultimately go with going forward. I know Joey Saputo up there. He likes the international. He likes the the sexy and the bigger name out there. So we'll see ultimately how that plays out. Anything else on this story, Mosse?
Well, except I saw a list of potential replacements, and one name that jumped out was Gabriel Batistuta. I don't know what the connection is there, but that's actually something people are talking about. So that would be replacing a big sexy name with another big sexy name.
Bigger name? No, I don't think so. But big sexy name, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that would be really interesting to see what he looked like there. The Italian connection, having played over in Serie A, obviously the South American connection, and we talk about the importance of these coaches being able to recruit, especially from some of these places that are ripe with a lot of talent that MLS is targeting. So maybe that's something there. All right, I mentioned U.S. soccer. And the United States Soccer Federation. This past weekend, Friday, Saturday, they had their annual general meeting, which is all where everybody gets together. For the most part, it's public. You were able to see it. It was all done on Zoom. Actually, for the most part, it was done on Zoom, and certainly everybody that was watching in on Zoom. A lot of stuff came out. We're not going to get into absolutely everything, but there was some interesting things, especially when it comes to the United States Soccer Federation trying to, and at times leading the way with what they want to do with the teams that they have, but also soccer in general as the governing body. And the decisions that they make, they affect all of the soccer folks out there in direct and indirect ways. And this was kind of their opportunity to show what they have done, where they are, and more importantly, where they are going forward, especially with things like the 2026 World Cup and this ramp going up as to what we are going to be, or what they want us to be, both as a federation, but also as a soccer playing nation. So that some of that was on display. The other thing that was going on was the elections. President, it's not a surprise. Cindy Parlacone continues on. She ran unopposed. She will finish out this next year, and then we'll see if she runs again. So they had to do an election. And as I said, I think that they are happy with the way things have gone. And then she will decide a year from now whether she wants to continue to do that. So she was, I don't know if it's reelected, but elected to finish out the term that she had stepped into when Carlos Cordero stepped out. So that's for another year. The real drama and the real interest was the vice president election, where there was 4 different candidates, including some people, quote unquote, on the inside, and then some people on the outside, which in the form of Kobe Jones, U.S. legend Kobe Jones. Ultimately, Bill Taylor, who can be considered the outside, although he's the head of Idaho state, the state of Idaho, ended up winning. So congratulations to Bill Taylor. Make sure that you get to work. And it was a really interesting type of drama that was going on. And I'm not going to get too much into the weeds here. Kobe Jones had support from the Athletes Council. Athletes Council by law has 20% of the voting power. He also had support from the pros, which is another 25%. You need 50% in order to get voted in. In the first round of balloting, Kobe Jones actually, I think he got something like 45. So he didn't get that 45%. In the second round of balloting, those people that didn't vote for Kobe Jones ended up switching their allegiance to Bill Taylor. And so in the second round of voting, Bill Taylor got the over 50 that he needed to win, and Kobe actually went down. So, as these votes happen, you see how people start to switch their vote and go for people that, while they weren't their first choice, they recognized they wanted to do it. Whether it's Kobe Jones or Bill Taylor or anybody else, the increased power of the Athletes Council is going to become more and more important, because while I said that it was at 20%, by the end of this year, it's going to be at 33% by law. And that means that they are going to wield even more power. And in that case, by the way, if that were to happen, if you had both the Athletes Council at 33% and the pros at 20% in one fell swoop, you wouldn't need a second round. And maybe Kobe would have won had that 33% been in existence right now. But it wasn't. So he lost. I appreciate Kobe and everybody who stepped up and put themselves out there for this and wanted to be a part. I think he will readily admit that he learned a whole lot. But going forward, the disconnect between the pros and the Athletes Council and everybody else is something that's going to have to be watched, because the United States Soccer Federation is much more than our men's and women's national team or the professionals or the pros out there. Okay. And all of these members are real concerned that their voice is being diminished, and they should be, because it's only going to be further diminished with the 33% to the athletes. And people going forward that run for positions, and people that are just in positions of leadership, they're going to have to find a way to bridge that disconnect going forward, or you're going to have a lot of angry people on your hands. And that's not something that the Federation needs to deal with all of the drama that's going on. So that's that part of it. Mosse, I know we want to talk about some of the benchmarks that they put out there. And that's important. The other big moment of drama, shall we say, was the repeal of policy 604-1, which for those that don't remember, was the policy that required players to stand for the national anthem when representing the United States. And we're not going to get in, like I said, into the weeds when it comes to it. It was repealed. 70%, I think, was the vote, made it so that when the national team is now played, the U.S. men's and women's and all national team players are not required in that moment to stand. Some decide to, some decide not to, some decide to kneel. I guess you could sit down, you could dance, you can do whatever you want in that moment. And this is a very different type of approach, and it's relative to the new world we live in. And obviously it had the votes and the support out there to make that change. Within that moment, people were given opportunities to stand up and to talk and to voice their have their voice heard, either for or against the repeal of this policy. And a number of people did, including Seth John, who is a member and at times captain of our Paralympic team. He has represented the United States from a national team perspective and from a military perspective. And he got up there and wow, he went for it. And it was an epic type of speech that immediately was looked at and caused a lot of people to be angry. So much so because of the things that he talked about, that we come to find out actually yesterday, Sunday, that he was taken off of the Athletes Council by a 2/3 vote, that they decided that what he was talking about relative to the his opposition of allowing players to kneel during the national anthem was beyond the pale. And once again, I'm going to let you go and read what he said. If you have a problem with what he said, as many do, that's fair enough. If you have a problem with the facts and his facts out there, that's fair enough too. I would just hope going forward, whether it's the Athletes Council or any council out there or anybody involved in the United States Soccer Federation, that this doesn't lead to us, having some sort of purity test out there for people that are allowed to be part of either the Athletes Council or the United States Soccer Federation or anything out there. And, I do believe in having people have opposing and sometimes opinions that I completely disagree with, but I do believe them being heard. I do believe in having a civil and respectful dialogue with folks out there. And I don't believe in canceling people. And so this is going to be really interesting going forward to see if there are ramifications or if nobody cares when it comes to Seth. And like I said, I'll let you go out and read it and decide for yourself if this was offensive to you or anybody else out there, or even if it was offensive, if you think that it rose to the level of them voting him out of the Athletes Council because he had a dissenting and differing view when it comes to this topic. But that was a lot of the drama that came out of it. There was also some very good stuff and some interesting stuff, which we're going to move on to, Mosse. And I want to get your opinion because, and let's take about 4 of the bullet points, because what they did was they said, these are what we want to do. These are our goals. These are our long-term benchmarks for both on and off the field on how we want to change. And I like that. I like people that kind of lay it out and are very clear, both publicly and privately, about how they want to go about doing their job and being successful. So Mosse, let's take a few of those. And if there's anything I said, Mosse, that you want to react to, go ahead, because I know that was a long little rip right there.
Well, no, I did want to go back to the VP election, because yet again, this was framed as the businessman against the athlete. And I know that's an eternal debate. Do you have a strong opinion on that? Do you find yourself always pulling for the athlete in these situations, or no? You think that whole notion is overplayed and business people have just as much qualifications to be at the upper echelons of the U.S. Soccer Federation?
I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you simply look at a candidate and are swayed by the fact that they are man, woman, whatever race, or being an athlete. Like I said, I mean, I want the best person for the job. I have met plenty of incredible athletes that have played at the highest level that I wouldn't want touching soccer from a business perspective or a leadership perspective, with a 10-foot pole. Okay. They are morons. Okay. Now I've met a lot of actual quote unquote soccer people. Okay. And what is a soccer person, right? We've had this discussion before, in that, it's kind of like the definition that the Supreme Court has for obscenity. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I know it when I see it. Right. And so what's a soccer person? There are a lot of soccer people out there that are incredibly intelligent, and I would love to have in leadership positions. And by the way, the opposite is true, in that I have met a lot of really, really of people that have no background when it comes to kicking the ball, or certainly not playing at any high level, that are incredibly smart, and I want leading, and I want in those positions of power and leadership. And some that have never kicked the ball, and it shows in the way that they go about their business. Kobe relied on being Kobe Jones. Okay. And by the way, and I had mentioned to you before that I had considered running. I would have relied on being who I am and used that to my advantage, which is one of the reasons why he was able to, get the support of the Athletes Council. One of the reasons, and as he should. But when you're on the Athletes Council, I wouldn't expect the Athletes Council just to vote for an athlete or to support an athlete simply because he or she is an athlete. I think you're not doing your job if you do something like that. So yeah, I mean, I think that there will be more people in positions of power and that are quote unquote soccer people or are former players right now. But Bill Taylor, the new VP, we're going to find out what he's made of and what he can do. And just because he hasn't kicked the ball at the highest level like a Kobe Jones, in no way disqualifies him from doing this job and doing it well.
Should we move on to?
Yeah, if you want, unless there's something else you want to say, my friend.
No. We can do it. So yeah, as you mentioned, they at this annual general meeting, they laid out some long-term goals. I'll go through the main four.
Yeah,
that
let's go through a couple of them.
U.S. men's national team currently ranked number 24 in the FIFA World Rankings. Goal is to push that into the top 8. Okay, they must not have seen Christian Pulisic's recent performances. We might have to lower the expectations a little bit. No, I'm kidding, of course.
No, I think that is an absolutely realistic type of goal and a good goal to have. You know, I mean, I would just top 8 seems kind of random, but okay, top 8. I would think top 10. Like consistently having the United States men's national team be in the top 10 is an achievable goal. And certainly I think right now, with as bullish as we are about our not just our U.S. men's national team, but the amount of good quality men's American men's players, that is absolutely an achievable goal. Now, a lot of it has to do with who you play and when it comes to rankings, but you know, for the most part, if you're qualifying and you're beating your teams in CONCACAF and then you're doing well at these international tournaments, that is going to happen. We have been in the top 10 before, but there was this moment of awe and rarefied air that that surrounded those moments. And we want to get to a point where it's not a source of celebration. Yes, it's a source of pride, but it becomes an expectation. The United States men's national team is in the top 10. Are they number 1? Not necessarily, but they're in the top 10 on a consistent basis. So that is a worthwhile type of goal, and certainly one that is achievable.
Maintaining the U.S. women's national team at the number 1 spot in the women's rankings.
Okay, so this is obviously a worthwhile goal, and there is precedent in terms of, which is why they want to maintain it. But this is also in the context of the rest of the world that we've talked about before is starting to catch up. Now, I don't think that they have caught up to the U.S., but they can very, very quickly make up a lot of that distance simply by doing what they're doing, which is spending more money and putting more focus on the women's game. And so that is going to happen, and I think it's going to happen at an increased rate. And so that distance will be shortened very, very quickly. What the U.S. needs to do is make sure that it maintains a distance. It doesn't have to be the great distance that exists now, but there has to be a distance. And how do you do that? Well, that's in the little details, okay? Because that's what's ultimately going to separate the great from the good. And the U.S. has been great for a long time. And so it means going forward, they're going to have to tweak how they do things. They're going to have to be much more focused on the development. They're going to have to meet the added the added money that is coming in from other teams on this side, and make sure that they are keeping up and keeping that distance, even just purely by the money that is spent. Now, we're seeing with NASL, all that is good stuff. So I think that can be done, but it's going to get a lot harder, and there's going to be a lot more people that are knocking on their door and chasing them and spending money out there. So can it happen? Maintaining the defending world champions U.S. women's national team number 1 spot in the world's ranks. Yes, it can happen. But I guess it's not about worrying, I guess, but I do see that as not necessarily as easy as we may think it would be. And, you know, your Brazil had an incredible head start, if you will, and certainly for a long time lived off of being Brazil. And, you know, I just hope that they don't, kill the golden goose, so to speak.
I'll lump the last two together. Increased youth soccer participation in the U.S. by 60% from 7.5 million to 12 million, and increasing the combined television viewership for both senior national teams by 241%.
That's an interesting number. So, yeah, and you're right to lump them together, because the more people watching soccer on television, the better off it is for the sport. It's not direct. Sometimes it's indirect, but there is a correlation. Look, if you are a man or woman out there who has the key and that magic to be able to sprinkle on the soccer world out there and get more people to watch soccer on television, someone's going to pay you a lot of money. And in particular, when it comes to Major League Soccer and NWSL and the United States men's and women's national team. So I think that this is doable. And obviously with 2026 looming, we all know that rampway is going to provide what we think is a whole lot more people coming into the tent. And so therefore a whole lot more interest, and that's going to drive additional viewership. As we said before, there are a lot of soccer fans in the United States. They're not necessarily a lot of MLS fans, okay? We saw some great numbers in the She Believes Cup when it comes to the women's national team, and hopefully that continues. And with them being such a juggernaut, and with Olympics coming and then World Cups coming, I expect that to increase. So that's going to be important. The increase about 60% from 7.5 million in youth soccer participation to 12 million youth soccer participation. That's interesting to me because, that's 60% increase. And now this is membership, I guess, if you will, and officially registered type of players, because the number is probably bigger than that. The number is absolutely bigger than that. But, this is the official numbers here. I think that is doable. Certainly. I think that is doable. Except that when we talk about doing something like that, it always comes back to money. When I was hearing the VPs give their speeches about stuff, it's all about inclusion, and we want to make it more affordable, and we want to have free soccer. Well, who's going to pay for all of this? Nobody ever gives me the details on how we're actually going to do any of this. And if you're going to increase by 60% from 7.5 million to 12 million, why is that going to happen? Is it going to happen just because of the 2026 World Cup? Is it just going to happen because of a gradual and steady increase? No, it's going to happen because fundamentally something is done differently. And a lot of times when you suggest that, you say free soccer or reduced cost soccer, or as I said, just having soccer be exposed to more people. Well, how are we specifically going to do that? And as I said before, who's going to pay for that? I would love to see it happen. We would all love to see it happen from a television perspective. And I think it can happen, but some very, very different approaches have to be taken, and some dramatic type of changes have to happen, I think, for that type of stuff to happen here in the next 10 years.
And finally, they laid out the schedule for the next 12 months or so. They did leave out the Olympic qualifying tournament, at least in the article I'm looking at, which, reminder, that's coming up this month on Fox Sports. Today, the U.S. announced a 31-man training camp roster for that tournament. And then a week from today, they're going to announce the final 20-man roster. So that'll be a big topic for us on next week's pod. But so I'm looking forward to that.
They left it out because this was about the full national team, right?
Yeah, probably. That's why they left it out. But yeah, so the U.S. will be headed to Guadalajara, trying to get one of those 2 Olympic spots. And then if they do, then they would also have the Olympics this summer. So it would be a jam-packed summer for them with the Gold Cup and Nations League and all the rest. So yeah, that was the other interesting thing that came out of it, the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, it's jam-packed. There's a lot of games, which is great. It's all on paper, and best case scenario, we know from having lived through 2020 that the best laid plans don't always come to fruition, but this would be great to see because it will give Greg Berhalter the opportunity, and it will give us the opportunity to see this team finally at certain points in this schedule, not at all the points, but at certain points, Greg Berhalter is going to be afforded the opportunity to call whoever he wants from this incredible pool that we have and that we talk about and we are celebrating, and rightfully so. And we're going to find out, knock on wood, everybody's healthy and everybody's able to be released at some point, who he and his staff ultimately think is that best 11 on the field, or that best 23 type of roster out there. That's what's really going to be interesting, is where those players are going to come from. And as we talk about the roster for the U.S. women's national team and people not having a seat when that music stops, the same thing is going to happen from the men's national team. And there's going to be some really, really good players and some good debate about who should be there, who shouldn't be there, and then who ultimately they pick. I'm knocking on wood that all of this happens and all of these different games. It's going to be a hell of a summer, wonderful summer. And then obviously getting into World Cup qualifying for the 2022 Qatar World Cup, which, as a reminder, happens in November/December of 2022, as opposed to the summer. All right, Mosse, anything else about U.S. soccer?
That's it.
There's a lot more that we could talk about. And I know, and there's people out there that are probably screaming and yelling, saying, why didn't you talk about this? And, why didn't you go deeper about the national anthem or Seth John or anything like that. There's a lot more that we could talk about. There's only so much that we can give you here in the State of the Union. So maybe in the future we'll re-examine some of these stuff and see how it's going and see if we're heading in the right direction here. All right, we're going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, we'll take a spin around Europe. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and we're going to take a trip around the rest of the world here. Mosse. That was a long segment, but I think it was worthwhile to kind of get the lay of the land of where U.S. soccer is going. But we're going to go over to Europe here. All sorts of interesting things happening, both on the field in terms of the results and what we saw, but also off the field and people and the things that they're saying, the provocative nature of some of these quotes out there. Where are we going to start here?
Well, we're going to start in Italy, where Antonio Cassano made headlines with his comments regarding Cristiano Ronaldo's time at Juventus. Now, these comments were made prior to their Serie A game this weekend. They were made in the wake of the 2-1 defeat to Porto in the Champions League round of 16. But this weekend's game only added fuel to the fire because Juventus drew Verona 1-1. They are now 10 points back of Inter. And so it is looking very likely that they are not going to win Serie A. Their streak of 9 straight titles is going to come to an end. And so Cassano came out and said, look, we know Cristiano Ronaldo is great, but looking at the team results, you could make a case that his signing has been a failure. It has not had the desired effect. And what he's basically pointing to is the fact that when Cristiano Ronaldo walked in the door in the summer of 2018, Juve had won 7 straight Serie A titles at that point, and they had reached 2 Champions League finals in 2015 and 2017, very recently. And he was brought in ostensibly to be the missing piece in the Champions League and get him over the hump. And they were knocked out in the quarterfinals his first season by Ajax, round of 16 last season by Lyon. They're now in danger of going out to Porto in the round of 16 again. So his point was, if they're getting knocked out, they're not even coming close to winning that competition and getting knocked out in even earlier rounds when they were getting knocked out prior to his arrival, then isn't it fair to say this signing was a failure? What say you?
I understand what he is saying, but I think he is neglecting a huge part of what the Cristiano Ronaldo signing was. And when I look and think about Serie A, okay, this was a seminal moment. And it's not that they haven't had big stars there before, but you and I both know that Serie A took a dive in terms of credibility, in terms of relevance in the world, right? And so getting that back and getting Serie A back so that it is part of the landscape and part of the conversation and in the hearts and minds of soccer fans around the world has been a priority. And so I think that his impact, okay, you can talk about it from a Juventus perspective, and maybe that's what he was focusing on. But I don't think that you can call it a failure. I think about Serie A in a different way simply because of the signing of Cristiano Ronaldo, okay? And you know, this is someone that has followed the league and has a great appreciation for league, but that there is a power and a value to that supersedes, you know, winning Scudettos or obviously getting to Champions League. I'm not saying that this wasn't an effort to have them be a better soccer team and i.e. get to a Champions League and win a Champions League, especially in that quest for credibility, okay? But you know, he has raised all boats. So it's not just the brand of Juventus that benefited from his signing, but Serie A benefited from his signing. And I think it diminishes some of that impact that he made by saying that this was a failure. Yes, in terms of the numbers, you can look at it, and they're not, you know, once again, they're not going to, not once again, but you know, for the first time, as you mentioned, they're not, unless something ridiculous happens, win the Scudetto this year. So that's on his watch, okay? And having not been back to a Champions League final is also on his watch. Now, is it all on him? Okay, because I think everyone recognizes that this Juventus team, by the way, with an inexperienced manager right now, is a work in progress. And certainly, in the same way that Barcelona, you would look at Barcelona right now, is not one of the great Juventus teams. Okay, and so is that on him? That I mean, he's scored the goals, right? He has been the star. He has been the ambassador. So I don't think that you can look at him as a failure specifically from a Juventus standpoint in that he hasn't done it. And I know we can get into X's and O's and how he is used and how he isn't used and how you have to adjust to have Cristiano on the team. But that happens with whatever team he goes to. What do you think, Mosse?
Yeah, the numbers on it. He scored this past weekend. He is the top scorer in Serie A this season, and he has 91 goals in 118 games in all competitions for them. But there is a school of thought that he wasn't a great fit either for Maurizio Sarri's style last season or Andrea Pirlo's this season, that he's a difficult player to fit into the collective. And so this whole thing wasn't all that well thought out. Yes, they added Ronaldo, but they didn't really build a team around him that's suited to his abilities. And so, it feels harsh for a player who's put up those kinds of numbers to say that his signing has been a failure. But I do think that club, I do wonder about these last two managerial appointments after Allegri. You know, you bring in, I'm always fascinated by clubs that we think are obsessed with winning the Champions League when they appoint managers with no great trophy winning pedigree. And that was certainly the case with Sarri. And then they opt for Pirlo, who, listen, I know there's this ex-player fetish, but boy, they really took it to an extreme, because even some of these other examples that people bring up, there was an intermediate step of some sort. Pep managed Barcelona B for one season. Zidane managed Castilla and was an assistant under Ancelotti with Real Madrid. Arteta was an assistant under Pep. Frank Lampard managed Derby County. I saw you on Twitter sort of bristling a little bit at this notion that Liverpool already thinks Steven Gerrard would be ready to replace Jurgen Klopp if Klopp decides to walk away in the next year or two. But at least Steven Gerrard, he managed that youth team at Liverpool, and now he's managing a pseudo big club in Rangers. There's at least something there. With Pirlo, there was nothing. So to hand the keys to a guy that had absolutely no coaching experience for a team that's under the pressure to win trophies that Juventus is, Andrea Pirlo might show himself as years go on to be a great coach, but there was going to be a bit of an adjustment in his very first season as a coach. And to bring in that sort of coach to a situation where you have a 36-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo and you're trying to win the Champions League, to me was just an awkward decision. And it's created a bit of an awkward mix here.
Would you, if he had said the same thing about Neymar at PSG, would it sit with you better? Signing of Neymar was a failure because they haven't yet won Champions League.
Yeah, I think that would be a bit more palatable to me. With Neymar, there's this extra issue of the injuries and how few games he's played. At least Ronaldo, Juve have gotten a lot of games out of him. He's a player they've been able to count on week in, week out, and he's at least been involved in all their biggest games. With Neymar, there's this extra thing of we paid all this money for this guy and he's missed half our games and missed all these important games, and we haven't won the Champions League. So yeah, I think it would be the statement would make a lot more sense if you were describing Neymar's time at PSG rather than Ronaldo's at Juventus.
Got it. Anything else from over in Serie A, my friend?
No, so Inter continue to roll 3-0 over Genoa. They are in first place. I think they're going to win the title, but give AC Milan credit. That was a big time win for them. 2-1 away to Roma to at least keep Inter within touching distance. It's a 4-point gap there. Juventus, I mentioned, are 10 back with a game in hand, but it's really looking like their run of Serie A titles is going to come to an end this season.
All right. Let's move on then. Where should we go? England?
Sure.
All right, let's do it. What do you got?
Well, we just talked about one player who left Real Madrid and Cristiano Ronaldo. I don't know if Jeff Hernandez set this up intentionally like this, but we transitioned to another in Gareth Bale. Gareth Bale is back, my friend.
Now, remind me again who Gareth Bale is.
Welsh legend, 4-time Champions League winner with Real Madrid. He's on loan with Tottenham. And it's been a difficult season for him. Him and Mourinho butting heads, but he's had a
has his loan been a failure for Spurs?
He's having quite the rejuvenation here lately. This past weekend, he got the start in the Premier League against Burnley, 2 goals and 1 assist, a real turn back the clock performance. He was absolutely sensational. And I've been a critic of Bale, but I have to admit, you could kind of see this coming if you look at recent games, because he started against Wolfsburg in the Europa League, had a very good game, a goal and an assist. Then their last Premier League game before this one against West Ham, he came off the bench and had an assist. And then in this last Europa League game, second leg against Wolfsburg, he came on in the second half and minutes later scored a goal. So he had been very productive lately. And Mourinho was convinced enough to give him a start in the Premier League against Burnley, and he answered the call. So this could be a bit of a game changer for Tottenham. I know it's one game, it's Burnley, so you're going to probably poo-poo it. But if they can ever get Gareth Bale going again with Kane and Son, all of a sudden Tottenham might be back in business. Good news for Ali Wagner.
Hey, listen, if it's the case, that's great. But it brings up a couple of questions. Number one, it's Burnley, okay? And is it just this anomaly relative to the competition, or is he really back in that he is world class, which at one point he was considered to be? But more importantly, I think if this is happening, as you say, Mosse, isn't this in a strange way bad for Mourinho? Not that he has a player that's functioning, but now you have to ask the question: well, what has happened? Has he changed his breakfast? Is it something that's going on right now? Why now? And why have we waited so long to see him?
Yeah, it's always a interesting question in these situations. Mourinho would argue, no, he's improved, and I'm now unleashing him at the perfect time. But then there are others that say, no, this is indicative of the fact that he could have been helping you a lot sooner. You just weren't playing him. So it's hard to tell. We're not in training every day, but that is sort of the whenever a manager takes his sweet time putting a player in, and then when he does play him, he does well. We sort of wonder if this could have been happening sooner, or no, the manager picked just the right time.
Well, we know that Jose Mourinho frames things in the way that are going to shed the best light on him ultimately. That's why I love him. Okay, what else? Chelsea United. Oh my goodness, we're really going to talk about this?
I tell you, a lot of these big six matchups this season have been another one 0-0. It's interesting. United now 12 points back of City. So if you're sort of harboring any hope still of a title race, then this would qualify as a bad result for them. But I've already given up on the notion of a title race. I know City, there's a midweek round now, and then City hosts United next weekend. So that would perhaps be the last chance for United to make this interesting. But I've already sort of written this off as a title race. So now I'm looking at United more from the perspective of them avoiding getting pulled back into that top four scrum. So in that respect, you could argue a 0-0 draw away to Chelsea is a good result, because Chelsea are one of those chasing teams. Chelsea are the top four right now is City, United, Leicester, and West Ham, but you've got Chelsea and Liverpool lurking there at 5th and 6th. So and Liverpool hosts Chelsea in this midweek round coming up. So that's more how I'm looking at United now in terms of avoiding that top four race.
And yet again, Mosse, another weekend comes and goes, and we are faced with the whining and yelling and angst and anger from the English when it comes to VAR. Okay. At what point is it's not VAR, it's the English? I mean, how have they not figured out how to do this? Now, there was controversy when it came to the actual VAR calls or the calls that were made or wouldn't made. And in the post game, talking about penalties that weren't called or are called. Is it something that they are doing or not doing over there, that each and every weekend we have VAR controversy when it comes to the EPL?
Yeah, the controversy in this Chelsea United game was a possible penalty for a handball on Hudson-Odoi. I was fine with that no call, by the way. I felt like it probably hit both players' hands, and so I don't know how you could sort of whistle on one and not the other, but and then the truly bizarre one was that episode in the West Brom Brighton game and the free kick and whether that goal should have been given or not. But yeah, I agree with you. Listen, VAR has there are inherent issues with VAR that still need to be worked out, but it's clearly some countries are making a bigger hash of it than others. I've talked on this podcast before about South American football and how long those reviews take and what a mess they're making of it. And yeah, within Europe, it's England that's really been the worst at it. I mean, you watch week in, week out these other leagues, sure, there's some controversies, but it's not nearly to the same extent.
All right, let's skip along here. Well, actually, we should mention that Timo Werner also with some interesting quotes after, or actually might have been before the game that he had, where he was talking about the scoring drought and the difficulties he has had adjusting to the English game. And at one point said, had he scored more goals, that his former manager, in the form of Frank Lampard, might still be there. Duh. Yeah, of course. It probably doesn't make Frank feel any better, but it also kind of highlights at times how helpless some of these coaches are and how dependent they are to these players doing their job. And when they put them out there on the field, yes, they're coaching in terms of giving them best possible ability to succeed. But if Timo Werner is saying, well, the same chance that I had back then are being created, I just scored them then, or I scored them now and I don't score them then. Like I said, I think it just highlights how difficult the job of being a manager and how dependent you are on others when it comes to being a manager, and how little impact you can possibly have when it comes to the stars aligning and fates and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. What do you think about Timo Werner's quotes?
It was refreshingly honest, but I also think he knows that nothing endears you more to the English media than talking up how much tougher the Premier League is than other leagues. So there's also a little bit of pandering there going on. He knows he's not performing, but that's at least a way to sort of curry some favor with the English media.
All right. Well, speaking of pandering, Liverpool win 2-0, right? So they're on just like cruise control now, right? We all understand what it is, and most importantly, what it isn't in 2021 at the end of this season. And so they're just going to figure it out or just cruise to the end and then figure it out over the summer. Anything to mention on any other games? No,
that's it. We can move on to Spain.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. We'll mention that, for those that love a good derby or both, whatever, Sunday, March 7th, right? The Manchester derby is happening, right?
Correct.
Oh boy. Okay. Do you want to make a pick right now?
Oh, Manchester City. Manchester
really?
City, Ivan Drago of the Premier League. Anything they see, they destroy.
They will just break you. Okay. Got it. All right. Over to Spain, my friend. What's going on over there?
Well, we had some debate about whether this story was big enough to move it up to the top of this segment. Before we get to on the field stuff in Spain, we should hit on this Barcelona news regarding their now former president, Josep Bartomeu, who has been arrested. There was a police raid in the Camp Nou offices, and they found some documents that seem to prove that what had been alleged a while back is actually true, that Barcelona, they hired an IT consultancy firm to help with their social media. But apparently what helping with their social media entailed was creating these burner accounts to trash enemies of the club, including some of their current players like Lionel Messi and Gerard Piqué, who at the time were criticizing Barcelona's front office. And so they went after them even as part of this whole deal. And so it was a remarkable story at the time. Nobody knew what to make of it. And now we find out that it probably actually was true. And so Josep Bartomeu, who, by the way, replaced a guy, Sandro Rosell, who himself went to jail for money laundering and that whole shady Neymar transfer. And so this is, Barcelona, being the president of Barcelona, it seems to be like a pathway to prison now. I don't know what's going on.
It's systemic, my friend. It's systemic. Now, a couple of things. So this is amazing. So as you said, we debated on where to throw this. The president, or I guess the former president of Barcelona, being arrested, it didn't even raise to the level of something that was on your radar or that you cared about. That to me was that to me, I just didn't quite understand why this wouldn't be of interest or something that you would want to talk about. I mean, it's amazing. The other thing is, okay, while it's sleazy, is it illegal? I mean, I don't know what the rules are over in Spain. Obviously, he must have done something illegal to have been arrested, but just creating a fake account, as sleazy and horrible as it is, I'm not sure that in and of itself is illegal. So we're probably going to find out some more. I mean, once you go into offices and start throwing around papers over there, there's, where there's smoke, there's fire, and they'll probably have some interesting things when it comes to the finances and the dealings of Barcelona.
And the election to choose the successor to Bartomeu occurs in just a few days, March 7th. And the results of that election could have a big impact on whether Messi stays or not. So we'll probably talk about that next week.
I wonder, can the new president pardon him? Because that.
Yeah.
All right. What else do we got over
on the
here?
field? Barcelona actually had one of their best performances of the season this past weekend. They won 2-0 away to Sevilla and should have won by a lot more. They actually had a really excellent performance. Ronald Koeman started a back three, and he pushed Serginho Dest and Jordi Alba into wingback roles, and it worked. Serginho Dest had a very good game. Messi with a goal and an assist, lovely assist to Dembele in the first half, and then he scored in the second half.
Mosse, hold on. You told me on numerous occasions that it was over. Okay, you told me, I don't worry about it. It's done. It's one of these down seasons, Real and Barcelona, whatever, and it's over. But I'm looking at the standings here. How did we get to this point here where first place Atletico Madrid, second place Barcelona, third place Real Madrid there? 58 points for Atletico Madrid, 53 points for Barcelona, and 52 points for Real Madrid. I mean, is the race still on?
Oh, absolutely. I Liga. Now, just to correct the record here, on multiple occasions, you tried to get me to call the La Liga race, and I never did. Jeff Hernandez is my witness on that. But Barcelona did win on Saturday, and that put a lot of pressure on Atletico because they took the field for their game against Villarreal, only 2 points up on Barcelona. But they got a nice win, 2-0 away to Villarreal. João Felix with a beautiful goal. And so they needed that to stabilize things a little bit, create some breathing room again. And we're going to learn a lot about this La Liga race in the next 10 days or so. Real Madrid actually played today. We're taping this on a Monday, and they played today. Tough game against Real Sociedad. Then next Sunday, Atletico Madrid hosts Real Madrid in the derby. Ooh. And then the following midweek, March 10th, Atletico play their makeup game finally against Athletic Bilbao. So after March 10th, finally everybody will be lined up games-wise, and we'll know exactly where we are. But yeah, it's shaping up to be actually quite the fun La Liga race here.
I love it. Should we end it off over here in Germany?
Yes, very quickly. At the top of the table, Bayern and Leipzig both won. Leipzig had an incredible comeback against Gladbach. So the gap is just 2 points still between those two. So terrific race at the top. But at the other end of the table, Schalke just can't get out of their own way. They have just 9 points from 23 games. And they have decided to sack their manager, Christian Gross, which means the next guy that takes over will be the 5th different manager to coach them in a Bundesliga game this season, which that's like unheard of in Germany. Sadly, in Brazil, that's not that uncommon. So I actually have some experience with this kind of stuff. And it never works out. When you get into this cycle where you're changing managers every few games, you always end up looking back at one of the first ones you got rid of and thinking, boy, we probably should have just stuck it out with him. And I experienced that with Vasco and Botafogo both this past season in Brazil, and they both ended up getting relegated. So this is just a complete disaster, this club right now.
I like it because if you're gonna change, then clean house, okay, and do it all. I mean, they fired everybody. I'm not sure there's anybody even in the offices anymore right now. They just full swoop came in and got everybody out there. And I want to remind people, we've said it before, but I think it bears repeating, which is one of the reasons why this is amazing, is that I know we talk so much about Bayern Munich, and rightfully so, and so much about Dortmund and these big clubs. Schalke is a huge club, and even though it doesn't have the the worldwide type of name of a Bayern Munich, the amount of people that support this team is why it's important that they are imploding right now. This is one of those major big types of clubs with huge support, with huge money, with huge expectations that, as I said, is imploding right now. And that's why this story is so fascinating. Now, they gotta work themselves out of this hole, or not only will they implode, but they're going to get relegated, which would be something.
I never get tired of pointing this out. They arrived at the winter break last season in 5th place with just 3 points fewer than Bayern. And at Fox, we were doing these segments of like mid-season awards, and we were talking up David Wagner as perhaps being the best manager in the Bundesliga so far that season. So it's actually in a relatively short time that this has all fallen apart for them. And, U.S. fans spent the second half of last season praying for Weston McKennie to be able to extricate himself from that horrible dysfunctional situation, which he obviously did. He's at Juventus now. And now people are feeling the same way about this Matthew Hoppe, who very promising striker who went on that goal barrage, but he hasn't been able to, he's now hasn't scored, but I mean, I can't blame him. I mean, who can rise above that mess? And so you kind of want to see him get out of there and go somewhere else.
Well, I mean, the lesson in all of this is don't get rid of your Americans. Okay. If you do that, bad things happen. And Weston McKennie's probably sitting over there in Torino saying, whoo, got him out. All right. They might be yelling about Cristiano Ronaldo and a failure, all that kind of stuff, but it's at least I'm not at Schalke. Okay. I know you wanted to really hit quick the Champions League and do a little recap.
Just to whip through last week's results. All 4 quote-unquote away teams won. I put quotation marks around it because the Atletico Madrid-Chelsea game was played in Bucharest, but it was technically Atletico's home game. There's a pretty strong consensus forming that Bayern Munich and Manchester City are the 2 best teams and the favorites to win this competition. And they both took care of business. City 2-0 away to Gladbach, Bayern 4-1 away to Lazio. So both those ties are done and dusted. Real Madrid, I mentioned they were limping into Bergamo to face Atalanta. It looked almost too good to be true for Atalanta. And sure enough, they get a red card in the first 15 minutes and have to play a man down the rest of the game and end up losing 1-0 to Real Madrid. But that one is not over. To me, Atalanta are capable of going to Madrid and winning 2-1 or 3-2 and going through on away goals. And then the Atletico Chelsea one, Chelsea win 1-0 on a incredible overhead kick by Olivier Giroud. And Atletico Madrid, who have been different this season, more expansive. If anything, the problem's been at the back. They had conceded in 7 straight games going into that match against Chelsea, which was a record under Simeone. But big European game against a club like Chelsea. They reverted back to their tried and tested formula. They were absolutely insipid in that game, very negative, lacked any ideas. And so that's led to some criticism of Simeone. I wonder what you think about that. There's a sense that, for a while there, it was kind of charming that in the super club era, Atletico were able with relatively, with fewer resources relative to these other clubs, were able to sort of crash the party just through grit and grinding it out. But it's gotten to a point the last few years where they've now spent money. They've bought a lot of attacking players. It seems like they're capable of playing better than they do, but still you put them in these big European matches and they revert to this approach. And so that has led to some criticism of Simeone. What do you make of that?
I mean, how are you going to, why are you going to try to make somebody something that they are not? Now, I'm not saying people can't change and people can't, evolve, but is it a surprise to you or anybody else out there that Simeone is this person and that doesn't matter the money or the talent, all that, this is who he is at his heart?
No, it's funny. The thing that throws people off the scent with managers like Simeone and Mourinho is that the lineups they put out on paper are not that negative. So in theory, you could look at that Atletico lineup against Chelsea where they had Koke and Saúl in the midfield, Thomas Lemar and Marcos Llorente out wide, a front three of Correa, João Felix, Luis Suarez, and say there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just the way they play. It's just the way he utilizes the players and the mentality that he instills. It's the same thing with Mourinho and his teams. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they Atletico fans, they kind of want it both ways. They have this chip on their shoulder that they're not considered a big club. But when you try to judge them by big club standards, they then back off and say, no, wait, we're still the scrappy underdog here. Don't lose sight of the fact that, so that's wwhere it gets a little bit.
But that is a byproduct of what happens day in and day out in training. Okay. If you have Simeone or put your manager in there, each moment in training, there are situations that players are put in, okay? And they make the decisions. In the game, the decisions are made and there's no real feedback or response. But in training, your coach, your manager is there, okay? And he or she, when that happens, when that situation happens, and you make a choice, it's either the choice that they want you to make, but if it isn't, it is corrected right there, sometimes very loudly, in that, no, you don't want to do that in that position. Now, there might be another coach or another team where they do want you to try that. Now, the reason why they say don't do that is maybe because of philosophy. They think it's too risky. That's not the way that they want to play. They are looking down the line that if you do that, then this, and all of those different things. But if you are told in different situations to do X, okay, then theoretically, once you get on the field, it will be in you and it will be part of your DNA, and you decide to do X. And that's going to play out on a continual basis over a course of a year if you are constantly being fed that information during training. And that's how these identities and that's how these styles of play are formulated, both in what you would look at as good or positive or romantic or even risky, or if you look at it as someone that's more pragmatic or defensive, in some cases, people would look at it as more negative. But that's how that comes to be, and how it's very, very difficult for someone to change that if that's all they've been told or if that's all they've been telling. Anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, time for Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi. You send us those questions, comments, concerns out there on all the different social media platforms using that hashtag Ask Alexi, or not, but we prefer it when you do. It makes it a whole lot easier to find, and those certainly do get priority. And then we pick a few each week, as we have done this week. What do the people want to know this week, Mosse?
First up, Peter Wick. I asked this a week or so ago, and no one answered. Who is the greatest player ever to play in the United States not named Pele? this is a test. There is one right answer. And by the way,
Ooh.
I clicked on this guy's Twitter account, so I saw what he thinks is the right answer. So I'll give that after you're done with yours.
Yeah. So the players that come to mind are immediately going to be all right. So he mentioned not Pele. So then it's down to Beckenbauer and Best, right? For me, and they're very different types of players, but I think in the way that we view them, yeah. I mean, who are some other ones out there, Mosse?
So his choice was Johan Cruyff.
Yes,
and
Johan
I would say
Cruyff.
it comes down to those three for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think those three, and I should have had Cruyff there, but those three for sure. And then it gets into secondary type of stuff, Canalias and these types of players. But of those three, then Mosse, it's so interesting because, I mean, look, Cruyff fundamentally changed the way the game is played and the way that we look at it. Obviously, he also benefits from the coaching part of it that still is part of who he is, even though it shouldn't matter as a player. Best is arguably, one of the most romantic and interesting and talented players who ever played the game. And I think there's a recognition that some of the stuff that he did, even when he was in the NASL, warrants that inclusion. And then Beckenbauer, also like Cruyff, changed the way that we view that game. I think he's probably right with Cruyff, but I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I would go with Cruyff. What about in the MLS era? I was thinking about this. Now, it's not necessarily based on anything they did in MLS, but just players who have played in MLS and then their overall pedigree and resume. So, for instance, a guy like Lothar Matthäus, who's a disaster and is like the cautionary tale on signing an aging player that's just looking to cash a check here. But his overall resume, I mean, 5 World Cups. I mean, it's incredible. And so who would you say? Is it Lothar Matthäus? Is it Thierry Henry? Is it Kaká, Pirlo, David Villa, David Beckham?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's to your point that is it the best player in terms of what he did in NASL or MLS, or is it just the best player ever to play the game? And so you're absolutely right.
Because MLS who has the best overall resume for his career.
Well, then, okay, so that has nothing to do. So Lothar Matthäus would immediately shoot up there, even though he was a disaster, like you said. But all right, so who are some of the players that we have had? You mentioned Thierry Henry, Didier Drogba, but I still think that. I mean, I think that David Villa. I think that he would certainly, with what he would MVP of the league, doesn't have an MLS Cup, so. David Beckham has that on him, but I don't think you put him on that echelon of types of players. Popularity, yes, but the best, that's a different type of thing. Man, that's interesting. That's an interesting question. I don't know. Any other ones pop out to you? Keane, he would be there, but yeah. Oh man, I don't know. What do you think? And by the way, if you go to the back to the other question, so if it's just the best resume, it's got to be Beckenbauer as an actual player. Okay, I'm not talking about Cruyff as a coach or anything. And Best didn't really have that international success because of who he played for, right? So it's got to be Beckenbauer. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Cruyff's resume as a player is not bad either. But
he didn't win a World Cup. He
didn't
win a World Cup though.
Yep. No, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
Next up, James Curran. Okay, I'm curious about your investment in Detroit. The news I see on Detroit soccer is minimal. Why Detroit? Tough town for soccer, I think. Indoor, outdoor, turf, grass, MLS timeline?
Interesting. Oh, so what he's talking about is that I am an owner, Mosse. I don't know if you knew this. I'm an owner of the Detroit City FC team that exists in my hometown of Detroit. I am a proud owner. I own you, Detroit. What was it? Sometime last year, I think it was, the opportunity came about, public opportunity, so anybody could do it, to become a partial owner and buy an equity stake in the actual team. Now, obviously, it's a very small and minority type of thing, but I am an owner in this team. And so you ask why? Well, having grown up in Detroit and having grown up playing soccer there, this is my hometown team. and this is something that I want to support. Yes, do I want to see Detroit have an MLS team? Yeah. Would I love to see Detroit City FC be that MLS team? Yes. I'm not sure that that's what the fans of that team want, but if that could happen, I think that would be great. Detroit has long been in the eyes of all leagues, including Major League Soccer, for its potential, for its size, for the rivalry prospects and the geography of where it is, with Columbus and Chicago and others being very close, Toronto, all of those different things. So I think it would be something that was welcomed. We saw the potential happen a couple of years ago, and then it was torpedoed because of the ownership group wanting to and changing their philosophy on having a soccer-specific stadium as opposed to playing in the American football stadium there with the Fords and Ford Field. So I think it will continue to be, especially now hearing the news that Sacramento it's not off, but the owner has backed out from that expansion possibility. I think there are going to be a lot of people that are kicking tires. I think there are going to be a lot of markets that look at it as an opening, maybe back in. And I would love to see Detroit do it. But regardless of that happens, it's my local team, and I want to support that team, and I want to support soccer in that city that I love, and Detroit City FC does a great job of giving people a wonderful experience, whether it's game day or just in general. I think they do a great job with merchandise, which I buy and I wear proudly. And now that I can call myself an owner of that team, along with a lot of other people out there, it's just it's a matter of pride when it comes to my hometown team there, and what they are doing, and hopefully what they are going to continue to do. I know at times I go back and forth with a lot of the supporters over there who don't feel that my intentions are genuine. You don't get to tell me how to be a fan of my Detroit City FC or any team for that matter. Okay. And so, no, I don't live in Detroit. I don't go to games in Detroit. This is how I support my team, as being that small little minority owner, and buying as I said, the merchandise and talking about this team. And once again, we talked earlier about these tests now that people have of whether you are true and authentic and real. And basically, it's just a definition that one group or one person says this is what it should be. And if you don't live up to that or fit into that, then you aren't. In this case, it would be a quote unquote true Detroit City FC fan. Well, as I said before, you don't get to tell me, and I don't get to tell you either. Okay, how you go about being a fan for whatever team it is, or whatever sport, or for whatever thing that you love and have a passion for. And you also don't get to tell me what passion is and what passion isn't. So anyway, that's the reason why, and I do see it in the future as being an attractive type of destination. Doesn't mean it's going to happen from an MLS perspective, but either way, the fact that there is professional soccer there warms the cockles of my redheaded Detroit heart. What else, Mosse?
And we'll end on this. NorCal asks, did FIFA allow rings back then? And what he's alluding to is a picture you posted on Twitter from your playing days. I believe it's from the '94 World Cup. Mm-hmm. And it's very visible that you had a ring on your finger.
Yeah, so when I stepped on the field for the World Cup and pretty much all international games that I played, it was a little more Wild West. It was a little more loosey-goosey when it came to the rules. You will see that as I finished and as the international game went on, and sports in general, you'll see pictures with players that were taped up and stuff like that. They really didn't enforce whatever rules were on the books. So when I stepped on the field at one point, back when I was playing, I had rings, multiple rings on both hands. I had bracelets on both wrists. I had necklaces, multiple necklaces around my neck. I at certain points I definitely had earrings in both ears, and at certain points had hoop earrings. Now, my hair covered it up, so you couldn't really see it, but full-on hoop earrings that I had going. I even had beads in my hair. Probably wouldn't be allowed to do that, or I would be accused of cultural appropriation or something like that. But I did have beads in my hair at a certain point, and headbands and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of accessorizing back in the day when it came to what I stepped on the field with. They weren't concerned with, with making me obey the rules. And the rules are in place for good reason, because you can get your finger snapped off if a ring gets snagged, or your earlobe ripped off, or other things out there. So yeah, it was it was full on rock and roll in a number of senses back then in terms of what we stepped on the field with. So yeah, it's changed a whole lot since then. So, but if you see pictures, I mean, I can't think of a single picture where one or multiple of those things aren't very apparent when I was running around on the field. And it was just what we did.
That's it.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay, let's see. That means that we're at the end of the show, Mosse. And at the end of the show, what do? Oh, you know what we do. We take a break, and then when we come back, I give you my one for the road. So don't go anywhere. I will be right back with that one for the road. All right, we're back, and it's time for the end of the show, which is where I give you my one for the road. Mosse, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the things that people said this week that had nothing to do necessarily with actually kicking the ball, but made news were numerous. And one that made news all over the world because of the individuals involved was our good friend Zlatan. Okay. And, Zlatan, when he talks, and he will be the first person to tell you this and admit this, people listen, because more often than not, he says things that are interesting, entertaining, and oftentimes provocative, which is exactly what happened this past week when he, through an interview that he did, talked about, and I guess to a certain extent called out LeBron James when it comes to LeBron and other athletes that use their platform and use their position to talk about things when it comes to politics. And he said that he didn't feel that that players should do that. And I want to be very clear. I think in the way that he framed it, it was because he didn't feel that was their expertise. And he said, my expertise is being the best soccer player in the world. And so that's what I do, and that's what I talk about. Now, he's being a little disingenuous because at times he certainly has talked about other things. I think he would probably respond to that saying, yes, but I know about those things. And so really what I think he was then therefore saying was, if you are going to use that platform, you damn well better know what you are talking about, and you better be educated about these things, which is how LeBron James responded and said, I would never not talk about these things that are important to me, to my country, to my community, and to my family that I see that are wrong in the world. And then he clarified and said, and I do it because I am educated about these things. And they might both be saying the same thing, just in different ways. But who knows? It was provocative, and it got a lot of people to look at Zlatan and say, not only are you being just disingenuous because you have done these things, but the way that you are talking about this stuff is not right and not helpful. And Zlatan takes L's at different times, and there are a lot of people that look at it as him taking an L and not being genuine in terms of the way that he was saying things. And I want to make sure that I respect the fact that there are people out there that don't want to see athletes talk about politics. And that is an absolutely legitimate type of approach to take. There are people out there that when they're watching on television or when they are paying their money, do not want to hear athletes talk about things that are not part of sports. Whether it's in an educated way or an uneducated way. They just don't want to hear it. And I think we've gotten to the point now where we don't even respect the fact that can possibly be how some people view sports going forward. Because we then associate it with, well, you don't care then. Or you don't think that they have the ability to do that. Or they should just stay in their lane. Or they're not real people. We all know that athletes are real people. Athletes pay taxes. Athletes look at the social issues that are going on in our country and in our world, and they affect them. That 90 minutes that they're out there actually playing soccer is only 90 minutes of their day, and the rest of the day, for the most part, they are, members of our society with all of the good and the bad and the challenges that we have. And the things that we are talking about oftentimes are things that do affect them, either directly or indirectly. But I do recognize that when it comes to the entertainment part of them and the platforms that they have and the moments that they have, there are people out there that just don't want to deal with it because it has become so divisive, because it has become so, for a lot of people, distracting. And that's an okay opinion to have, in the same way that it's okay to look at these men and women and say, you know what? They have these platforms, they have these bullhorns, they have people that are going to listen, and they are highlighting things that are important to you. Here's what you do: turn it off. Okay, don't watch them if it bothers you that much. Okay, but I also think that it is incumbent on whatever athlete, when they are talking about different things, not to talk out of the what, okay? To be educated, to understand that if you are going to approach this and inject yourself into this realm, then I think you do have a responsibility to be knowledgeable, to be up to date, to be to have the ability to see nuance and all of those different things. And I think you'll find that those that are able to do that are the ones that really resonate, because yes, you are given that platform, and yes, you are given that microphone, but with that means that it's going to be amplified. And if the amplification is that you're a moron, that's not good for you or for your brand. So we'll see, because I don't think it's going to stop. I only think that it's going to continue and increase, and there will be those that will turn it up, and there will be those that turn it off. Mosse, anything before we go?
That's it.
All right. As always, we appreciate you stopping by here on the State of the Union, our little endeavor here each and every week. We thank you for downloading and for reviewing and for subscribing and doing all the different things out there on all the different platforms. We know that yours and ours is a world full of podcasts. Everybody and their mother has a podcast, and that you choose each and every week to hang out with us on our little State of the Union podcast warms the cockles of all of our hearts here. So thank you so much for doing that on a continued basis. We will see you and talk to you again next week, same time, same place, right here on the State of the Union podcast. And as always, size the day. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.